How to use DynaNotes eligible math TEKS programs. Be sure to view what are DynaNotes student course notes and how to use DynaNotes student course notes parts 1 and 2. These videos will help you get the most out of these valuable tools. But looking in more depth, specifically at the math program, I'd like to draw your attention to the top portion of any of the activity books, which has a message to the student. And this has some good reminders here for the teacher as well. Several of these check marks refer to the use of the notes. They include that the student should refer to their course notes before whole group instruction begins for a new lesson. This is in keeping with research that shows that access to a visual aid before and during instruction increases understanding, retention, and recall. Also, of course, the student should refer to the notes when completing an activity, when checking their work, or when checking or correcting a classmate's work. And of course, the notes should be used to review course content from beginning to end before STAAR assessments, and of course, reviewing particular sections before the skill checker activities are attempted. But the other check is a bit different. It's not about the use of the notes. At times, your teacher may give you a copy of the answer key. In many cases, the answer key shows line-by-line solutions. This is an example of an answer key page that's been printed from the answer key PDF file, which is found on the teacher CD. And you can see that these composite area problems have been solved line by line and calculations have been shown. Later in the video, we're going to talk about several different ways to use the answer key. But one thing we want to hone in on is no matter how the answer key is used, the student has an opportunity to do error analysis on their own work. And this can be extremely valuable for honing your students' mathematical skills. So what do we mean by error analysis? Specifically, I would encourage students to determine whether their error that they made, if they got the wrong answer, was due to a misunderstanding or perhaps answering the wrong question. Was it due to an incorrect or illogical strategy? Or was it simply a calculation error? So this is an example that demonstrates all three types of errors. Jay has $10. He buys 2 bags of chips for 75 cents each and a sports drink for $1.75. How much money did Jay spend? Well, let's take a look at the blue answer. It looks like 75 cents each times 2 bags of chips, $1.50 for chips, $1.75 for a sports drink is $3.25 total. He had $10, he has $6.75 left. Well, that looks correct to me. Why is it wrong? Well, it comes back to the question, was how much money did Jay spend? There was a distractor in the problem. And so for a student who has made this kind of mistake, it would be the first type of error, which is misunderstanding the problem or the question. So let's look at the second problem. This student said 2 times 0.75 plus 1.75, that's 2 times, let's see, these two added together is 250, that's $5. So in this case, it's the second type of error because the student has violated the order of operations. And instead of doing the multiplication step first, they did the addition step first. And so this is not logical. And you could actually, with amounts like these, pull out some models and do some examples to show the student that that's not going to work. The third example, 75 cents times 2, we have $1.50. Then let's add $1.75 to 1.5 and we get 1.90. 0 carry my 1, 8, 9, 190. So $1.90 is how much Jay spent. Of course, that's not true either. And in this case, the student has made a calculation error. You could also consider this a logic error potentially. because lining up the decimals goes back to the logic of the commonplace values being aligned. But in any case, we do have a calculation error here. And so there's 3 different ways to get the wrong answer. Now, for the student to take the time to determine what kind of mistake they made is important because it shows where the student needs to be more cognizant and more careful, okay? If the problem is up here and misunderstanding the problem or question, then that student needs to read the question more carefully, set up the problem more carefully, perhaps adding more labels into their work, as opposed to the calculation error, in which case the student needs to just be more careful and move step by step in their calculations, being sure they align decimals and follow the rules of how to properly do their calculations. So that's just an example of how a student needs to focus on a different area to improve depending on why they made the mistake. Error analysis can end up improving a student's performance over time. Of course, another way to use the answer key effectively is to see another way to get the same right answer. Sometimes the student will have the answer calculated correctly and logically and have understood the problem and the question, but they will go about it a different way than the answer key shows. Many times the answer key shows a number sense approach when appropriate. It's going to be common for students to take a different approach than that and to more directly calculate their answers. So in any case, it gives the opportunity for the student to see another way to get to the right answer. Having a detailed answer key that often shows line-by-line work and even calculations for the student gives the teacher a lot of different options on how to use those answer keys in their classrooms to move through the program. So let's look at some of those. Certainly the traditional time is up, time to turn in your activity to the teacher is one approach that you can use. The teacher can, of course, use the answer key to grade the work, and then when returning the work to students with the X's and the checks on it, the teacher can easily include the answer key with that returned work. This is going to give the students more information than just that they got the answer right or that they got it wrong. Of note, there's no reason this teacher cannot still differentiate the feedback that he or she gives to the student. But it's nice to not to have to set up the entire problem in order to do that. The teacher may just want to call some attention to one part, and they can do that either on the answer key that they're returning to the student or, of course, on the student's work. One of the reasons that this is valuable, other than the reasons we already went through on how the students can use the answer key, is that it really saves the teacher a lot of time, but it still allows the students to get feedback and even, like I said, differentiated feedback if the teacher adds additional notes. Another traditional way to grade papers as you move through is hand your work to the person behind you. In this case, the answer key could be projected from the teacher's CD, and the teacher can review each problem and solution and take advantage of any teachable moments in a whole group format. So this allows the teacher to zoom in because it is a PDF file and just perhaps focus in on the top problem and work through the problem and let the students grade each other's papers. Now let's look at how the answer key can help you set up self-checking stations in your classroom. We have these student responder cards, but you could use almost anything. These are kind of nice. And you can fold them so that the colors face outward and then add a little bit of tape. Take a Sharpie marker and write the number for the activity and the words answer key, and then you've got a little tent that you can set up at each table. In this case, we are setting up a self-checking station for Activity 61 composite area problems. And so with a dry erase marker, the teacher can write 61 on our self-checking answer key station tent. Have some colored pens. They could be all red or some different colors for grading. And have several copies of the same answer key. And so when students complete their work, they can come to the station, grab an answer key, grab a pen, and then check their work. So here's an example where Eileen has already checked her work for activity 60, and now having completed activity 61, she comes to the answer key station, gets the answer key for activity 61, and moves through each problem. In this case, she's gotten problem number 1 correct. She can see, though, that she worked the problem a little bit differently than in the answer key, but some parts she did about the same way. And so she checks off her work, and she has no additional information to add to this one. On problem number 2, however, she got a bit distracted and forgot that there were 2 O's in Ohio. So she can see where she made her mistake by comparing her work to the answer key. And so she's able to also make a note of what it was that she had forgotten to do. Setting up self-checking stations gives rise to another way to use the entire program, and that is self-paced. In this case, the first activity assigned in the lesson area of composite 2D figures is activity 60, this skill builder. Next comes the skill developer, which was the problem that we just went through, activity 61. The next activity is composite figure construction, which is a skill extender. And finally, there's the skill checker. So if you have answer key stations for activities 60, 61, and 62 placed about your room, there's no reason your students could not work at their own pace to complete those activities, take their work each 1 page at a time to the station, correct their work with the pens available. They're not allowed to bring a pencil to the station. Come back, go to the next activity, and work at their own pace through those activities. One thing of note, if you decide to let your students self-pace, is that skill extenders do not generally introduce new content or cover standards that have not already been covered in the builder and the developer. So this gives you an added ability to differentiate the instruction so that students who are moving at a slower pace can still perhaps finish the developer but skip the extender and hopefully still be ready to do well at the skill checker. The skill checker is a bit different from the other activities. Every lesson ends in a skill checker. We recommend this activity to be treated differently than the other activities that lead up to it. The skill checker has the standardized test-like questions for the STAAR test. And so at this point, while on the prior activities we want the students to be referencing their DynaNotes and their TEA chart to be successful, when it comes to the skill checker, we want to take away the course notes and see how the students do without any reference now that they have built up their skill set. Of course, students should still have access to the TEA reference chart. The answer key is another thing that's different about the skill checker. The answer key shows no detail on how to work out the problem. Instead, just the correct answers are indicated. The intention is that reviewing the problems in the skill checker for each lesson become a whole group review, really type of a spiraling activity where the teacher uses the problems to reinforce all of the concepts and skills that have been taught in that lesson, taking advantage of as many teachable moments as possible. Now, this review could be simple explicit instruction led by the teacher, or the teacher could have different students come to the front and explain how to do each of the problems. But in any case, you want to come up with some way to, as a group, move through all of the concepts one more time. And the skill checker should give you the opportunity to do that. If you think about the lesson as a whole, in this case, the lesson was area of composite 2D figures corresponding to this section of content in the DynaNotes. It begins for the student with the teacher's warm-up questions and with an explanation of this content. And then the student moves through the assigned activities, which are the builders, the developers, and the extenders. And then there is a quiz, if you will, the skill checker. And the student proceeds through the skill checker without the notes. And then finally, we're back into a whole group type setting where the teacher is spiraling the class through content.